Alright, for those who missed it, for those that have yet to read the book or have seen the film, this film was titled Starship Troopers, based from Robert Heinlein's, book. It was basically a parody of a fascist state, so I guess there's a joke somewhere around here. Alright class, settle down and let me tell you a story. We're back with another tale of valor parallel to one of the biggest action icons of the 80s. Although he didn't exactly inspire the book, that was someone else, he certainly lived up to it according to our favorite American propagandist, the Fat Electrician. But before we check it out, please like, share, subscribe, do the whole notification button thing to help me out with the algo, and here we go.
John Rambo, the action hero that was an unstoppable, unkillable Green Beret from the Vietnam War that went into battle with nothing more than a big knife. This video is not about
big
him.
knife.
It's also not about the man that inspired that character. That was Audie Murphy.
This
video is about the real Rambo, the actual man that was inspired to join the military because of Audie Murphy, that would go on to become a Green Beret and go into combat.
So he was inspired by the real Rambo, or the one that inspired Rambo.
Against 1,000 men with nothing more than a big knife.
There we go. Chapter 1.
Born on August 5th, 1935, Roy's first memory in life was attending his own father's funeral after he had passed away from tuberculosis when Roy was 3 years old. One year later, Roy's mother would remarry, and 9 months after that, she would give birth to Roy's new half-sister, and from that moment on, Roy was essentially on his own. His parents gave all of their attention to their new daughter, and
yeah, it's always the kid or the children left behind.
Roy and his younger brother Rogelio were kind of neglected. 2 years later,
they were
Roy's
set
mother
aside.
would develop a cough that would get progressively worse and worse, similar to how Roy's father had. Roy's mother now had tuberculosis too, and while she was on her deathbed, her husband, Roy's stepfather, would inform her that he would absolutely not be raising another man's kids. And 6-year-old Roy
there we go.
says he's terrified. He has no idea what's going to happen to him and his younger brother Rogelio. He's already lost his dad, he's about to lose his mom, and his stepdad doesn't want him, and that's the only family he's ever known in
Hard
his
life
entire
out there.
On the day of his mother's funeral, his stepfather tells him and Rogelio to pack their things. They're going to go live somewhere else. They load up in the car,
where somewhere else.
The funeral's held, and at the funeral, a man comes up and introduces himself as Nicholas Benavidez. He is their father's brother, Roy and Rogelio's uncle, and they're going to come live with him. After the funeral, they load up in Uncle Nicholas's car and they head off.
So I'm so glad they didn't end up in the streets or something like that.
El Campo, Texas, Roy and Rogelio's new home. Upon their arrival, they get to meet what is going to be their new immediate family. They have their Uncle Nicholas, their Aunt Alexandria, their grandfather Salvador, and their 8 cousins. Roy is then informed that it is now going to be 7 boys sharing 4 beds, and that everyone in this family has to work to make this entire thing work because they don't have a lot of money. All the kids in the family are expected to go to school, get good grades, and then after school, they all have a job that they are expected to go out and do to help contribute to the family. And at the age of 7, Roy's first job was to go shine shoes to earn a little bit of extra money. Then in the summers, or any time the opportunity presented itself, they would all go out as a family and work in the fields picking crops. And this goes on for Roy's entire childhood, and his new family is incredible. His aunt, his uncle, his grandfather Salvador, they're the best people on the planet, but they're also being...
Alright, so he actually grew up with a good support system. I mean, it was rocky at first, but you know what? Family or good people actually made his life better.
Spread across their work and the 9 other kids in the house, so no kid gets a whole lot
left
of attention.
behind.
So between that, losing...
technically, they all got left behind equally.
Abandoned by his stepfather, he's kind of an angry kid, understandably so. So at a young age, he developed a pretty bad attitude, and he was not afraid to fight about it. One of his favorite things to do when he was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old was to go to the movie theater and watch the newsreels of all the different things that were happening in World War II. And he was inspired by the paratroopers. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to be in the United States Army. But the problem with this pastime of going to the movie theater to watch all the newsreels was that you had to pay to get inside, and Roy didn't have any money. All his shoe shining money went back to the family.
So he snuck himself in.
Other kids would wait outside the movie theater for one of the previous showings to leave, and hopefully rich people would throw their pocket change out and let all the poor kids scramble and fight over it. It didn't take Roy long to figure out that if he just beat up all the other kids, he would get all the money, and then he wouldn't have to run and dive for pocket change.
That was good practice.
The enemy cannot push a button if you disable his hand.
And that's just the beginning of the fight.
Wait! Alright, for those who missed it, for those that have yet to read the book or have seen the film, this film was titled Starship Troopers, based from Robert Heinlein's, book. It was basically a parody of a fascist state, so I guess there's a joke somewhere around here.
The enemy cannot push a button if you disable his hand.
And that's just the beginning of the fighting. It gets so much worse because as World War II progresses and all the young men go off to fight this war, there's a huge lack of manpower all across the United States.
Always a lack of manpower.
One of the things the United States government does is basically opens up the southern border so that people can freely come into the United States and begin working. Because of that, there ends up being this huge misconception, especially in any state bordering Mexico, that any person of Hispanic descent wasn't even American. They were just some Mexican that was showing up to work in the fields.
Y el acento, ¿dónde are you from?
Check this out, right? We've all seen the issues going on with illegal immigration. But back then, when America had a revolving door policy, there was this paper that stated that America had less problems regarding illegal immigration for the simple reason that it had an open door or a revolving door policy, because most of these people know that after working for a couple of months, they get to go back home. So the problem is when they close down the borders, these people are now forced to stay because they'd be out of a job. So technically, according to that particular paper, that the revolving door policy or an open door policy was way better because they know that after a day's work, they can go back home. Or after working for a few months or a few years, after saving up some cash, they could go back home. But the thing is, when they closed the borders, when they closed everything down, their problem now is that they're forced to stay or else they'd be out of a job. They just, can't come back to the US to work like they did before. So, I don't know. Not exactly an expert, but that's at least, that's what that particular paper said.
Scranton. Y before that, La Philadelphia.
This leads to young Roy getting picked on at school. All the kids are calling him a dumb Mexican. They're telling him he's not American. They're calling him a pepper belly. And he's like 8, 9 years old. He has no idea what's going on.
Yeah,
so he goes
what
to
does
his
it mean?
Salvador. And Grandpa explains to him, Roy, the Benavidez family fought against Mexico to gain their independence, just like any white person's ancestors fought against Great Britain to get their independence. Your mother was Yaqui Native American. You are just as much, if not more American than anybody else.
They were native.
The Benavidez family name is Mexican, but we are Americans. You have multiple cousins fighting for America in the war right now. Don't ever let anybody tell you that you're not American, which is a great sentiment. I love it. However, what young
kids aren't exactly going to get that.
They fought for it. From this point forward, anybody that wants to make fun of Roy has a fight on their hands, and they almost never won because Roy, at the age of 9, 10 years old, has been working in fields and shining shoes after school.
He's got muscle, yo.
He is way above the average level of toughness for a young man. And Roy wasn't even that big of a kid. If anything, he was smaller than average, but none of the bullies were bigger than him either once they were looking up at him from the flat of their back, which is always where they happen to find themselves eventually. Now, it's also important to mention that
man here knows how to throw hands.
He's not afraid to fight about it. He does have standards. He was being raised right by his aunt and his uncle and his grandfather. Roy would not hit a girl if a girl made fun of him.
He's a good kid.
But what he would do is when they went out to recess, he would kick dirt at her until her brother or her boyfriend came to stop him.
There we go.
Beat the shit out of that guy.
Hello, how are you?
And this goes on for Roy's entire childhood. He's always getting in fights. He struggles in the classroom academically, but outside of school, he does work super hard to help provide for his family. He still loves going to the movie theater, watching all the newsreels about World War II. He still wants to grow up to be a paratrooper, and he also loves hanging out with his uncle and his grandfather, Salvador. And his grandpa had all these amazing stories that he would share with him, and all these stories had some
stories of the First World War
or some lesson that Roy needed to be taught. And his favorite story was when his grandpa was younger and he was a cowboy, and he was on this trail, and another cowboy had fallen off his horse down onto a cliff face and he was stuck. And Grandpa Salvador stopped, took his belt off, and lowered it down to help pull this cowboy up and saved his life. And the moral of that story was, when somebody needs help, you help him. And all this keeps going on until he's about 14 years old and he drops out of school. He's not going to go to high school. He's just going to go get a full-time job and help support his family. So that's what he does. He goes out and he starts working at this local tire shop. Uncle Nicholas, realizing that Roy is going to be a man soon and that getting in fights like he does is going to have real-world repercussions, figures that he needs to help Roy get
no longer have that shield of minority.
Start amateur boxing, and Roy is incredible at it. He makes it all the way to the state tournament his first year of doing it. All
right, there we go. State tournament, no impossible record, like 9 was it the 9 straight knockdowns, like the other guy, like, winning all those fights with a knockdown.
There he ends up losing his very first match.
There
And in the
we go.
locker
That's
room
more
after
realistic
his
now.
fight, the young man
An
that had
actual
just
loss.
beat him comes up and wants to shake his hand now that they have their gloves off. And Roy's anger and temper gets the better of him, and he ends up fighting this kid in the locker room, wrestling him into a stall and shoving his head into a toilet. After Roy does that, all the other coaches, all the other fighters, Roy's coach, all look at him like, what the fuck, dude? And they're all disappointed. And it was the first time in Roy's life.
That's a career-ending thing if you fight outside the ring or fight in the locker room. Yeah, that's going to be a career-ending thing. I mean, he's going to be lucky if he walks away with a suspension.
That he felt ashamed and disappointed in himself.
Yeah.
And this is where Roy really starts to get a lid and a grasp on how to control his anger. After that, Roy gives up amateur boxing and just continues working full-time at the tire shop. And that's when his boss, Mr. Haddock, the tire shop owner, also kind of becomes his father figure too, because he works with him and he's around him so much. He just becomes that older male role model that Roy has always kind of been looking for. And he continues to help Roy mature and get a better grip on his anger and more control of himself. And this goes on for a couple of years. And then one day when Roy is 17 years old, a recruiter from the Texas National...
I mean, I guess everyone else should feel lucky that that was the worst thing that happened, a locker room brawl. I mean, that's it, right? That's the worst thing that he did with all those anger issues because of being abandoned as a kid.
National Guard comes in and wants to hang up a flyer at the tire shop for anybody who's interested in joining the Texas National Guard. And on that flyer was none other than Roy's role model, Audie Murphy, the most decorated soldier of World War II. You see, this is right in the middle of the Korean War, so Audie Murphy, the World War II war hero, had joined the Texas National Guard to help with recruiting, and he was also going to train the next generation of soldiers. And at this point, Audie Murphy's the shit. He's got an award-winning book, he's an actor, and when he's acting, he's playing the role of himself in movies, and he's being told by directors, hey, I know you were there and you're literally just portraying the shit you did, but you need to tamp it down a little bit because it's so unrealistic, nobody's going to believe this story. This is a Texan that was rejected by the Marine Corps for being too small, and then went on to be the most decorated soldier of World War II, earning the Medal of Honor for going toe-to-toe with an entire German SS battalion by himself
there we
on the
go.
back of a flaming
I think I've seen this one
with a 50 caliber machine gun. So Roy Benavidez figures if the Texas
they'd have a hard time believing it.
Then that's exactly where he wants to be. So he goes, he joins the Texas National Guard, he ships off, goes to basic training, ends up coming back. He's doing his weekends, he's doing his training in the summer. That goes on for a couple of years while he's still working at the tire shop with Mr. Haddock.
All right, so he's now in the right direction, and that locker room brawl is the worst thing that happened. Right, so far so good, right?
Then one day he decides that he likes doing army stuff a lot more than he likes changing tires, so he wants to go full-time army. He goes
is the whole 20-year thing a deal in this whole time? Can someone please put it down in the comments?
The Army and the Air Force, all right there in one building.
I mean, during this particular point in time in history, could you actually do the whole 20-year thing and then just retire afterwards?
Roy walks right past the Navy, walks right past the Marines, walks right past the Air Force, goes straight to the active duty Army recruiter, says, here's my guard papers, I'm a corporal, I want to be a paratrooper. I don't just want a contract, I want a contract that guarantees me airborne school. At this point, the Army recruiter looks at Roy, who's like 130 pounds soaking wet, and he's like, man, you're not big enough to be a paratrooper. At which point, I'm paraphrasing here, but Roy says something along the lines of, well, I could cut you down to my size and we'll see if you're good enough to be a paratrooper. Maybe that'll help you make a decision.
There we go.
At which point, the Marine recruiter over here...
Wait a minute, wait. I mean, not big enough to be a paratrooper. I know for a fact that there's almost always a height and the weight requirement. Please, to become an Army paratrooper, is there like a required height or weight requirement to safely jump out of a plane? Because I know there's physics and there's some science involved of a man jumping out of a plane. I mean, if you're 130 pounds soaking wet, won't there be a problem for anyone jumping out of a plane? Because I know for amateurs, that's the reason why they strap the instructor behind you. But is there a weight requirement for you to be able to jump out of a plane or to join the paratroopers for safety reasons? Can someone please put it down in the comments?
Here's that, and he comes walking over and is like, son, you should be a Marine. You've got the right attitude.
Yep.
I don't care how big you are. You should come be a devil dog with me. At which point, Roy's like, no, I don't want to be a Marine.
Duty?
I want to be in the Army, just like Audie Murphy was, which brings everything full circle because Audie Murphy...
Wait, the Marines rejected Audie Murphy. Is that how he's going to swing this?
He was rejected from the Marines for being too small, and now Roy Benavidez is rejecting the Marines because he wants to be like Audie Murphy. Then the other Army recruiter,
there
who's
we
a
go.
captain and officer, somebody that outranks the sergeant that thinks Roy's too small, comes in and he's like, no, we'll take him. Come with me. So they go, they start doing the paperwork.
Thank God for
Roy's
officers
like,
or for
"Okay, I'm a corporal in the
supervisors."
National Guard. I've already been through basic training. I've already done through job training. You should just be able to send me straight to airborne school and then give me a duty station. And the recruiter's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Roy signs on the dotted line. He packs his shit. He gets on the bus and he's off to the Army. And Roy then immediately finds out the hard way that recruiter was either not listening to him at all or he was lying to him because they sent Roy straight to basic training.
Lying. Definitely lying.
Again. And to add insult to injury, he is also not awarded an airborne slot after that, so he's not going to be a paratrooper like he always wanted to. After he gets done with training, he immediately gets sent over to Korea, where he is going to be there right after the Korean War ended, and he's going to be manning the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, between what is now North and South Korea.
I mean, the DMZ is a flashpoint, so I guess he's gonna get what he wished for, an active duty station. It's like one of the most dangerous places in the world. The DMZ, at least, during that particular point in time.
He's in Korea for a year, then he comes back home for a little bit stateside, then they ship him out to Germany, and while he's there, he learns how to speak German, and in Roy's own words, he becomes the first Hispanic American that could speak German with a southern accent.
Correct. Correct, though.
He gets done in Germany, he comes back home, he goes to military police school, becomes an MP, and he gets assigned to basically being a glorified chauffeur for high-ranking military officers, generals, colonels, etc. And then randomly, one day, a couple months out from his contract being up with the Army, he's trying to decide whether or not he wants to re-enlist.
Would he re-enlist?
General Westmoreland asks him, you ever thought about being a paratrooper? And Roy's like, yeah, actually, that's the only reason I'm here. I wanted to do that.
Full
I kind of got
circle.
screwed out of it. I'm thinking about re-enlisting, and if I re-enlist, I really want to be able.
I mean, I guess he kept a lid on his temper because recruiter or the captain definitely lied to him, and now he's being asked if he wants to be a paratrooper. I mean, he's stuck with the whole thing. I mean, usually with this kind of story, the dude that got lied to usually would go AWOL and look for a fight somewhere else.
Able to become a paratrooper. To which the general kind of like doesn't even really continue the conversation. He's just like, huh. Well, that's neat. Anyways, we're at the airport now. I gotta go. Bye. And then Roy never sees this guy ever again. A couple months later, Roy's contract
was
is about to
General
be up.
Westmoreland.
He has to decide if he's going to re-enlist or if he's going to get out. And his potential re-enlistment contract, there's an airborne packet courtesy of General Westmoreland. If he decides to re-enlist, he will get to go to
so
airborne
Westmoreland
school,
actually
and
kept
he
his
will get
word.
to become a paratrooper.
Nice. Airborne!
So that's what he does. He goes to airborne school, gets his jump wings, becomes a full-fledged paratrooper, and then he gets stationed with the legendary 82nd Airborne Division.
What was his height? I don't know if it's real or not, but in the modern paratrooper setting, a lot of people literally diminish their own height by an inch or two because of the impact on their vertebrae, and not to mention the weight, but also the impact on their vertebrae. Can someone please put it down in the comment if that's real?
Out of Fort Bragg. I mean, Fort Liberty, sorry.
Liberty.
Okay, sidebar. Look, I don't care if we're going to be renaming stuff every once in a while. That's completely fine. However, name it after a war hero.
This better
or
not be a...
Don't just pick a generic term like Liberty, okay? I don't need Fort Liberty. I don't need Fort Life. I don't need Fort Pursuit of Happiness, okay? Quit doing generic shit and name it after an actual badass war hero. Anyways, Roy's at Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty, North Carolina. He is with the 82nd Airborne. During this time, he's training, he's working, he's doing his thing. He also ends up meeting his wife, and he goes about this the old school way. He has to have chaperone meetings with her until he earns enough street cred to finally be able to sit on the front porch of her parents' house with her. Her name is Lala. They get married, she ends up getting pregnant, things are going exactly how they're supposed to go. And then in 1965, Roy gets deployed to Vietnam at the age of 30. Roy gets sent over there as an advisor.
In his 30s.
Training the South.
That's relatively old at 30. I mean, most of these kids, well, they're literally kids. They're teenagers, 18, 19.
Vietnamese and how to fight back against the North Vietnamese and hopefully prevent the spread of communism.
So I guess he's doing his 20 years.
He starts training these guys, he's working with them, and it gets to the point that he has to end up going out on some of these missions with them because they need a leader. They need somebody with more experience to go out and show them how it's done. And he does that multiple times. And then one day he's walking through the jungle and all of a sudden,
bang. There we go.
Roy has no idea what's going on. 1 second, he's in South Vietnam on a mission. The next second, he's in a hospital in the Philippines, and everything goes by in a blur. And before he knows it, he's in San Antonio at the Fort Sam Houston Medical Center. At this point, Roy still
Was it an
has
ambush
no
or a
idea what's
mine?
going on. Doctors and nurses are coming and going. There's some pregnant woman named Lala that's trying to hang out with him all day long, and he's just not comprehending anything that's happening to him.
Right.
Roy's wife, Lala, would be informed that Roy had stepped on a landmine in
landmine.
South Vietnam during one of their patrols.
Check this out, right? It just reminded me of this one particular story. Professor X, there was this reverse novelization of X-Men, the first one, the one in the early 2Ks. According to that particular story, the reason why Professor Xavier is in a wheelchair was because he fought in Vietnam and he stepped on a landmine. Nothing, just a quick sidebar, quick tangent.
And they don't know how he survived, but the going theory was that it was some type of defect with the landmine, that when it exploded, the entire landmine didn't fragment, but the top of it stayed intact as one solid metal plate, and when he stepped on it,
So basically, the only reason he survived was because of a defective landmine. Lucky him.
detonated it, and the landmine plate shot up and smacked him on the ass so hard that it broke his back and jolted his brain so severely that they don't think he'll ever...
I guess that's the reason why he's alive. I mean, it went up his ass. Just imagine if it went directly into his spine. He'd be dead or he'd be paralyzed for life or something.
Never regain his memory. In addition to that, due to his broken back, he would almost certainly never be able to walk again, even if he did come to mentally. And this goes on for weeks of Lala showing him pictures, telling him stories, trying to remind him of who he was.
So he had a good
wife.
wife.
One day, he just wakes up. He snaps out of it. He's sitting in a rehab room at the hospital by himself at a table, and in front of him, there's like the child's toy, you know, the big rectangle with like the cylinders and the squares and the triangles, and you shove each one through the corresponding shape. He's sitting there with that in front of him.
Very important, by the way.
The person is like, "Can you put the shapes through there, Roy?" And he's like, "Yeah, obviously I can put the shapes through there." And they're like, "Well, why don't you go ahead and do it?" He's like, "What, am I applying to get into the Marine Corps? Like, what is happening right now? Why do you think I can't do that?" And they're
ASVAB waiver for the Marine Corps.
like, "Well, just go ahead and do it." So he does it. And he's like, "Okay, obviously, what is happening right now?" They then explain to him that he has been unable to do that for weeks every single time they've got him to try, and Roy is just like literally snapped out of it like that. He's 100% mentally all there. He just doesn't remember the accident.
That one was good. That one was really good. Application ASVAB exam, ASVAB level exam for the Marine Corps.
In itself, he remembers everything else. So Roy's back. This is great.
Okay.
Now he just wants to get back up on his feet. He wants to keep serving in the army. He wants to keep jumping out of planes. He wants to go back to Vietnam and be with his guys. And that's just how Roy is. So he demands that they start giving him physical therapy as soon as possible. And that's what he does. And over the course of a couple weeks, he comes to the painful realization that these physical therapists aren't getting him ready to walk and run and be in the army again. They're getting him mentally ready to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. The doctors are telling him he's never going to walk again. He's going to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair, and he needs to accept that. But Roy's not buying it. If they're not going to push him to get the results that he wants, he's going to push himself.
I spent some time in a wheelchair. Wasn't that bad, actually, but I guess it would have... I mean, I was only in a wheelchair for like a couple of weeks, but yeah, I guess it would have been a problem if I was stuck there for like forever.
Night nurses come in, they catch him, they give him a pill, they knock him out, they put him to sleep. He wakes up the next morning, his hip hurts from where he fell out of bed, and his leg muscles are sore from bearing weight for the first time in months. But the plus side, his hip hurts and his legs are sore, so obviously they're gonna work if he just
keeps he has feelings in his legs.
Stronger. So that's what he does every night. He rolls out of bed, he drags himself across the floor, lifts himself up, and puts as much weight on his legs as he possibly can. Sometimes the nurses catch him and try to put him back to sleep. The nurses are getting pissed off at him because he keeps doing this, but his legs keep getting stronger and stronger, and he's able to make it over to the nightstand faster. There we go. And it gets to the point where all the other guys in this medical bay realize PT and muscle therapy. They start cheering him on at night. Nobody's ratting him out. They're trying to distract the nurses to get Roy the time that he needs to be able to do his version of physical therapy. And this goes on for months. During the day, they're getting him ready for his life in a wheelchair. He's begging them just more time for more PT and he'll be able to walk again. They're not buying it. They're doing the paperwork in the background to get him med boarded out of the U.S. Army. They know that he's done. But Roy never gives up on himself and he keeps training every single night. Then after After having been in the hospital for 5 months, a doctor walks in with Roy's discharge papers. Roy begs and he pleads not to discharge him out of the army, and the doctor finally says, Roy, even if we continue doing PT, at best, maybe you'll be able to stand up one day. You're never going to be able to walk again. At that point, Roy hops up out of the bed, stands directly in front of the doctor, and takes one step towards him. And it was one of the most excruciating pains that he's ever felt in his entire life. He's got tears in his eyes, but he's looking this doctor right in his face, and the doctor, shocked that Roy hopped out of bed and took a step towards him, says, Benavidez, if you can walk out of this room, I'll tear these papers up. So Roy walked out of that room.
There we go.
Shortly after that, he walked out of that hospital and went back to Fort Bragg.
I just had to use that one.
Obviously, he gets assigned a desk job, but despite that, Roy's going to do the best job he can no matter what tasks they give him. So he crushes that job the best he can, and when he goes home at night, he continues to train. First, he starts walking a couple miles a day.
So he PTs himself out of spite.
Then he's running 5 miles a day. Then he's running 10 miles a day and doing 500 push-ups in a single day, every day. And he works himself up to being just...
Did he say like 10 miles a day? Yeah, that's real. I mean, I've known guys who run for 20 miles a day.
Just as fast, just as strong.
And I've also known guys to beg the doctor to please don't tell coach about the ACL or because they'd lose their scholarship. Well, technically they wouldn't have lost their scholarship, but the thing is they would lose their athletic benefits or their active roster benefits. So they begged and cried the doctor to please don't tell the coach.
Strong as he ever was. And then, since he did such a good job at that desk job, he kind of figured out how things worked. And then wouldn't you know it, one day, out of the blue, Roy Benavidez's name ended up on a manifest to do one of the jumps for the 82nd Airborne training. Not just one manifest, but 3. Roy did 3 jumps in a single day after having broken his back.
What are the odds of that? What are the
I wonder
odds
how
of
much
that?
height did he
And
lose?
after having done that, Roy sits back, relaxes, reflects on his achievement. No, I'm just kidding. He goes out and decides that he wants to become a Green Beret now. So he goes on to Special Forces selection, and he becomes a Green Beret. On one hand, absolutely incredible. It is almost unbelievable that he's able to accomplish this. On the other hand, it's obvious that he was going to be able to accomplish this, right? Because if you don't know about these Special Forces groups, it's never like the fastest, the strongest, the freak athlete that ends up making these Special Forces units. It's always just...
can someone put it down in the comments? Was it the Green Beret or was it the Navy SEAL or something? There was this guy. He looked like an accountant. I forgot his name. Anyways, if you look at his picture, you'd never know that he's an SF soldier. You'd actually think that he was a paper pusher for the Pentagon or something. But anyways, he looked like a complete nerd, but no. He was one of the founders of, I can't remember, I think it was Delta Force or the Navy SEAL or something. Can someone please put it down in the comments? Anyways, he looked like an accountant. He looked like a mayor or something. Anyways, he simply did not look the part of an SF soldier because everyone's been conditioned to think that, Special Forces soldiers generally look like this, the beard, the tats, the whole vet bro thing, but no. He looked like a high school teacher. He looked like a total nerd. But he founded, I'm not sure if he founded it or something, but he was supposedly one of the best or one of the quote-unquote founders of that particular SF branch or something. Forgot his name.
Farm kid that you're going to have to kill to get him to stop. It's that person that's never going to quit. And if there was ever a embodiment of that archetype of person, it's Roy Benavidez. Okay? Yeah. Homie stepped on a landmine and literally walked it off. Of course he had what it took to become a Green Beret. That's just to get
technically he needed like months to recover.
And get all of his other training. He becomes a linguist. He gets cross-trained as a medic. He gets trained on every heavy weapon system. He becomes trained in military intelligence, the gathering of information. So he gets done with all this training. Then he gets orders that he is going to be deploying to Central America. Here's the problem. Roy doesn't want to deploy to Central America.
I actually saw a film titled The Green Beret. What was his name? John Wayne. He was supposed to be a Green Beret colonel, and then it was bad. The film was all about propaganda, but guess what? It's a John Wayne film. By the way, I'm not really sure if this is correct, but there was an article that I read somewhere that compared to his contemporaries, John Wayne was quote-unquote a draft dodger. I mean, compared to his batchmates in Hollywood, his contemporaries in Hollywood, who literally volunteered for combat duties, who flew combat missions, or who fought in the front lines in their 40s or in their late 30s, John Wayne sort of dodged the draft. I mean, despite his this macho or action man persona. So, can someone please put it down in the comments? I forgot where I read that article that he didn't live up to his tough guy persona.
America, Roy wants to go back to Vietnam. So Roy goes back to that very same office that he worked in for a little while he was training before he became a Green Beret, and wouldn't you know it, somehow or another his orders got changed and he was sent to Vietnam instead.
Again.
Me.
I mean, isn't that what he always...
He was going to be going to other...
Wait, so he got screwed over again, but isn't that what he always wanted? Thank you for watching, guys. Now, if you want me to check out other stories here on YouTube, please let me know in the comments. We upload every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard. Please like, share, subscribe, do the whole notification button thing to help me out with the algo. And don't forget to check out our Twitch channel where you can catch me do this live. Now, class dismissed.